Welcome. We're not here to coach creativity. We're here to put it under a microscope, to map the invisible forces that decide which ideas actually make it and which ones, well, disappear. Our examination starts right now.
This isn't just an opinion. Think of it as an observation of a system. Any creative process that's built on waiting for a feeling is built on a design flaw. It's a foundation that is absolutely guaranteed to fail under pressure. It's not a question of if, but when.
So, for the rest of this analysis, we're going to dig into the mechanics of why that is. We're going to look at three core mechanisms that explain exactly why a system of consistent production will always beat a reliance on inspiration.
All right, let's jump into the first mechanism. This one really gets at a belief that so many of us hold. The idea that to do good work, you have to feel ready. But is that really how it works?
You know the myth. We tell ourselves we need to be in the right mood, feeling inspired, motivated, just right. But really, waiting for that feeling is a form of what's called emotional gating. It's just a fancy way of giving ourselves permission to wait, to delay. A routine, on the other hand, makes that whole internal negotiation completely irrelevant. The work just happens, whether you feel like it or not.
So when you separate the action from the emotion, the work just keeps going. And that naturally increases your volume of output, right? Which then does something incredibly important. It lowers the cost of any single failure. One bad idea, one failed attempt, it becomes less personal, less of a catastrophe, and more just data. It's just part of the process.
Now let's move on to our second mechanism, which builds directly on that idea. This one challenges another one of those romantic notions we have, that brilliant creators start with this perfect, fully formed vision that they just need to execute.
But here's the real insight. Clarity is not the starting point. It's the result. You don't think your way to a great idea. You actually build your way there. The very act of making something is an act of discovery.
It's a constant feedback loop. You take an action, you write the first lines of code, you sketch the wireframe, you draft that first chapter. That's when your idea makes contact with reality for the first time. And guess what? Reality immediately pushes back. It shows you the flaws, the friction points, the things you never could have seen in your head. And that feedback is what generates real insight. It's what refines your understanding of what the idea was meant to be all along.
Okay, this brings us to the third and final mechanism. Because if you're constantly making things and getting that feedback, you're not just producing output. You're actually training the single most critical creative skill there is, your judgment.
We tend to think that quality comes from some kind of innate, almost magical talent. But the reality is much more, mechanical. Good judgment, what we often call taste, is a skill. And just like any other skill, it's trained through repetition. Specifically, it's trained through a high volume of exposure to your own failures. You learn what works by seeing up close and personal what doesn't.
You can actually see the long-term effect pretty clearly here. On the left, you've got the inspiration-based creator. See how their judgment is all over the place? It's spiky, unpredictable, because the moments of practice are too few and far between. Now, look at the right, the output-based creator. Their judgment develops steadily, reliably, and eventually it blows the other one away because it's being trained every single day. One is playing the lottery, the other is building an asset.
So the crucial point is this, that internal editor, that gut feeling for what's good, what's done, what needs to be thrown out, that's not a gift, it's a muscle. And it's built through the process itself, a process that just waiting around for inspiration will never give you. It's a product of the system, not the state you're in.
Now, when you pull these three mechanisms together, routine, output-driven insight, and iterative judgment, you start to see a whole new mental model take shape. The focus for elite creators isn't on managing their internal state. It's on designing an external system.
So what is a creative system? It's an environment. It's a structure you build outside of yourself that literally forces production, interaction, and feedback to happen completely independent of your mood. It's not about willpower, it's about architecture.
And that's the cost of getting this wrong. A creative process that relies on a feeling is fragile by its very nature. The moment it runs into real-world pressure, deadlines, budgets, tough feedback, it doesn't just bend, it shatters.
So, with that entire framework in mind, let's pivot from just observing to actually diagnosing. We're going to end with three questions for you to analyze the structure of your own creative engine.
First question, when do you create? Is it scheduled? Is it a non-negotiable part of your calendar, like a utility you just pay? Or is it sporadic? something that only happens when the mood happens to strike.
Second, what did you make this week? And I don't mean what did you think about or plan or intend to do. I mean what tangible output exists in the world right now that didn't exist 7 days ago.
And finally, the last one. What are you polishing? What's that one idea you're endlessly refining, protecting from feedback, perfecting in total isolation, instead of just shipping it and moving on to the next rep? The answer to that question reveals which game you're actually playing. Are you building a system, or are you just waiting for a feeling?